Thank you, Mr. President. Can you explain how you view, your great healthcare plan will impact Americans' health insurance premiums?
It's going to be it is a tremendous plan. It's called the Great Healthcare Plan. And we're going to get tremendous reductions, as you know, through, if you look at medicines and prescription drugs, they're going to come down by numbers that have never been seen before. And we're doing that by most favored nations. Other nations, whoever pays the lowest in the world, that's what we're going to pay. Right now, we're paying sometimes 10 times higher than other nations. So we have favored nations. That's been approved. Other nations have, for the most part, agreed to it. And they had no choice, otherwise we were going to put tariffs on them. Mr. President, the health care plan that we're coming, the money's going to be paid directly to the people. So it goes directly, not to the companies, not to the insurance companies. It's going to go directly to the people, and the people are going to buy their own health care. They'll get much better health care at a much reduced price.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to 45th Perspective. I'm your host, and today we're diving deep into something that's been making waves on Capitol Hill. The recent Senate hearing concerning the proposed American Families Act. This bill, as many of you know, aims to significantly expand social safety nets, from childcare subsidies to universal pre-kindergarten and paid family leave. It's a massive piece of legislation, with a price tag that has sparked considerable debate. And the hearing we're discussing today really brought those arguments into sharp focus. Before we get too far into it, if you find this kind of in-depth analysis valuable, please do me a favor. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and ring that notification bell so you don't miss any of our future discussions. And if you're looking to support the channel and help us continue creating this content, you can find us on Patreon at patreon.com/45thperspective. Your support truly makes a difference.
Pull out of NATO if it doesn't help you acquire Greenland.
Well, we're going to see. NATO has been dealing with us on Greenland. We need Greenland for national security very badly. If we don't have it, we have a big hole in national security, especially when it comes to what we're doing in terms of the Golden Dome and all of the other things. We have a lot of investments in military. We have got the strongest military in the world, and it's only getting stronger. And you saw that with Venezuela. You saw that with the attack on Iran, with the knocking out their nuclear capability potentially. So yeah, we're talking to NATO.
Mr. President. Not militarily.
Sorry, guys, you cannot push too much.
I don't talk about that.
Mr. President.
You urged protesters in Iran earlier this week to keep fighting in the streets and said that help was on the way. Is help still on the way, or has your bar
Well, we're
for
going to see. As you know, Iran canceled the hanging of over 800 people. They were going to hang over 800 people yesterday. And I greatly respect the fact that they canceled that.
Mr. President, Prime Minister Carney is in China. Prime Minister Carney is in China. How do you see the deals Canada and China have just signed, trade deals between the two partners?
Well, that's okay. That's what he should be doing. I mean, it's a good thing for him to sign a trade deal. If you can get a deal with China, you should do that.
Election in Venezuela.
Did Arab and Israeli officials convince you to not strike Iran?
Nobody convinced me. I convinced myself. You had yesterday scheduled over 800 hangings. They didn't hang anyone. They canceled the hangings. That had a big impact.
Yesterday you accepted Maria Machado's Nobel Prize medal. What do you intend to do with it, and why would you want someone else's Nobel Prize?
Well, she offered it to me. I thought it was very nice. She said, you know, you've ended 8 wars, and nobody deserves this prize more than in history than you do. And I thought it was a very nice gesture. And by the way, I think she's a very fine woman, and we'll be talking again.
Say it?
What's the trigger for the Insurrection Act in Minnesota? What are you waiting for?
Well, the Insurrection Act, which has been used by 48% of the presidents as of this moment, the Insurrection Act also, if you look at it, I believe it was Bush, the elder Bush, he used it, I think, 28 times. It's been used a lot. And if I needed it, I'd use it. I don't think there's any reason right now to use it. But if I needed it, I'd use it. It's Very powerful.
President Trump, you just called Machado a very nice person. You said the meeting went well. Why align with Delcy Rodriguez and the remnants of the Maduro regime and not with Machado, who has the support of the Venezuelan people?
Well, if you ever remember a place called Iraq where everybody was fired, every single person, the police, the generals, everybody was fired, and they ended up being ISIS. Instead of just getting down to business, they ended up being ISIS. So I remember that. But I'll tell you, I had a great meeting yesterday by a person who I have a lot of respect for, and she has respect, obviously, for me and our country. And she gave me her Nobel Prize. But I'll tell you what, I got to know her. I never met her before, and I was very, very impressed. She's this is a fine woman.
Where are you going to March for Life? The March for Life is next week.
Yes.
And some pro-lifers are worried about your support for the Hyde Amendment. What do you tell them?
Well, you know what I tell them? You're going to hear about it because I just taped a beautiful piece for them, and they're going to play it. And those are great people. I want to tell you, they're great people. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everybody.
Now, let's talk about this hearing. It was, to put it mildly, a microcosm of the current political landscape. We saw impassioned arguments from both sides, each presenting a vision for America that, while different, they genuinely believe serves the best interests of the American people. And that's the core of what we're going to explore today. Not just what was said, but why it was said, and what it all means for you and me. The hearing kicked off with opening statements, setting the stage for the contentious debate to follow. Proponents of the American Families Act, primarily from the Democratic side, emphasized the urgent need for robust government intervention to address what they see as systemic inequalities and economic pressures on working families. They painted a picture of a nation where childcare costs are crippling, where access to quality early education is a privilege, not a right, and where a medical emergency or the birth of a child can plunge families into financial crisis due to a lack of paid leave. Senator Thompson, for instance, opened by highlighting statistics on rising childcare expenses, noting that for many families, childcare now rivals or even exceeds housing costs. He spoke movingly about single parents struggling to balance work with the demands of raising children, often without adequate support. His argument was clear. The market, left to its own devices, has failed these families, and it's time for the government to step in with substantial, structural reforms. He framed the bill not as a handout, but as an investment in human capital, arguing that a stronger, healthier, and better educated populace ultimately benefits the entire economy. He cited studies suggesting that universal pre-kindergarten, for example, leads to higher educational attainment and increased earning potential in adulthood, ultimately paying for itself through increased tax revenue and reduced social costs. He also delved into the specifics of the paid family leave provisions, pointing out that the United States is an outlier among developed nations in its lack of a federal paid leave mandate. He shared anecdotes of individuals forced to choose between caring for a sick parent or losing their job, illustrating the stark human cost of the current system. For him, the American Families Act is about fundamental fairness and bringing the U.S. in line with modern labor standards. On the other side, Republican senators and their invited expert witnesses raised serious concerns about the bill's scope, its potential impact on the economy, and its long-term financial implications. Senator Davis, a prominent voice against the bill, immediately challenged the cost estimates, arguing that the true price tag would be far higher than what was being presented. He voiced worries about inflation, pointing out that injecting trillions of dollars into the economy, even over a period of years, could further devalue the dollar and erode the purchasing power of ordinary Americans. He drew parallels to past government spending initiatives, suggesting they often lead to unforeseen consequences and economic instability. Davis and other Republican members also focused heavily on the concept of individual liberty and the role of government. They argued that expanding federal programs to this extent would create an unwelcome dependency on the state, stifling innovation and individual initiative. They questioned whether the government is truly the most efficient or effective provider of these services, suggesting that private sector solutions and greater personal choice are preferable. One witness, Dr. Eleanor Vance, an economist known for her free market perspectives, testified that the proposed childcare subsidies, while well-intentioned, could actually distort the market, leading to higher prices and reduced quality as demand outstrips supply, or as private providers are forced out by government-subsidized options. She also raised concerns about the work requirements, or lack thereof, in some aspects of the bill, arguing that overly generous benefits without strong incentives to work could reduce labor force participation, further exacerbating economic challenges. Dr. Vance advocated for tax credits and other market-based mechanisms that empower parents to choose the childcare options that best fit their needs, rather than a one-size-fits-all government program. The debate around funding was particularly heated. Democrats largely suggested that the bill would be paid for through a combination of tax increases on corporations and high-income earners, as well as enhanced IRS tax enforcement. They argued that wealthy individuals and large corporations are not paying their fair share, and that these revenue streams are both equitable and sufficient to cover the bill's costs without burdening middle-class families. They pointed to the fact that corporate profits have soared while many ordinary Americans struggle, arguing for a rebalancing of the tax burden. Republicans, however, countered that raising corporate taxes would make American businesses less competitive globally, potentially leading to job losses or businesses relocating overseas. They also argued that increasing taxes on high-income earners could discourage investment and entrepreneurship, ultimately harming the broader economy. Senator Davis specifically highlighted concerns that the proposed tax increases could indirectly impact small businesses and middle-class families who might own shares in affected companies or rely on the jobs they create. He emphasized that the proposed tax enforcement measures, while perhaps recouping some lost revenue, would be insufficient to cover the full cost of the bill, leading inevitably to either higher taxes on a broader base of Americans or increased national debt. He argued that the true cost of the bill would fall on future generations, a debt that would hamstring their economic opportunities. Another fascinating aspect of the hearing was the discussion surrounding personal responsibility versus societal responsibility. Proponents of the bill argued that societal structures often create barriers that individuals cannot overcome on their own. They emphasized that a healthy society supports its members, particularly during critical life stages like early childhood and family caregiving. They framed the bill as a necessary step to ensure that all children have a fair start, however, and that families are not penalized for prioritizing individual agency and the potential for government programs to erode personal responsibility. They argued that parents should primarily be responsible for their children's upbringing and financial well-being, and that overly expansive government programs could diminish the role of families and local communities. They also raised concerns about the potential for federal overreach into areas traditionally managed at the state or local level, or within the private sphere. This philosophical divide between collective good and individual liberty really underpinned much of the back and forth throughout the hearing. My personal take on this is, as always, a bit nuanced. It's impossible to deny the very real challenges that American families face today. The cost of living, particularly childcare, is a monumental hurdle for many. And the lack of paid family leave is, frankly, an embarrassment when compared to many of our peer nations. The stories shared by advocates during the hearing about parents sacrificing careers or facing financial ruin to care for a sick child or new baby are deeply compelling. There's a clear moral and economic argument to be made for supporting families in these ways. A society where parents can't afford to work because childcare is too expensive, or where they can't take time off to bond with a newborn without risking their livelihoods, is not a thriving society. Investing in early childhood education, in particular, seems to have a strong long-term payoff, both for individuals and for the economy as a whole. However, the concerns raised by the opposition are also not to be dismissed lightly. The sheer scale of the proposed spending is indeed staggering, and the potential for inflationary pressures is a legitimate worry. We've seen how quickly prices can rise, and for families already struggling, further inflation would be devastating. The debate over how to pay for these programs is crucial, and simply raising taxes on corporations and the wealthy, while politically popular in some circles, doesn't come without potential economic ramifications that need to be carefully considered. It's not as simple as just saying the rich will pay for it. The ripple effects of significant tax policy changes are complex and often unpredictable. Furthermore, the question of government efficiency and potential for unintended consequences is always present. While the intent of the American Families Act is noble, implementing such vast federal programs effectively and without creating new bureaucracies or distorting existing markets is a monumental challenge. The risk of creating dependency, while often overstated by critics, is still a factor to consider. Finding the right balance between providing a necessary safety net and fostering individual initiative is incredibly difficult. Ultimately, what this hearing highlighted is the ongoing struggle to define the role of government in modern American life. Do we lean towards a more expansive government that proactively addresses social and economic inequalities through broad programs? Or do we prioritize individual freedom and market-based solutions, believing they ultimately lead to greater prosperity and choice? There are valid arguments on both sides, and reasonable people can, and do, come to different conclusions. For ordinary Americans, the implications of this bill are profound. If enacted, it could mean significantly reduced childcare costs, access to free pre-kindergarten for their children, and the peace of mind that comes with paid family leave. These are tangible benefits that could genuinely improve quality of life and economic security for millions. However, the potential downsides, such as increased inflation, higher taxes down the line, or concerns about government overreach, are also very real and deserve our full attention. It's not an easy answer, and this hearing certainly didn't provide one. What it did provide was a clear articulation of the different perspectives at play. And that's what we need to keep in mind as this debate continues to unfold. It's vital to listen to all sides, understand their motivations, and critically evaluate the evidence and arguments they present. So, what are your thoughts on the American Families Act and the arguments made during this Senate hearing? I encourage you to share your perspectives respectfully in the comments section below. Let's keep this conversation going. Thank you for tuning in to 45th Perspective, and I'll see you next time.